Imagine this. You're living your normal life in the bustling 21st century, and suddenly you're responsible for a girl who's just traveled through time. From 1200 years in the past. That's right, this story follows Su Qing, our unsuspecting protagonist, who finds himself in a bizarre situation. Caring for a girl from the Tang dynasty who appears out of nowhere, drenched and clueless about modern life. His biggest challenge? Teaching her how to survive in today's world. Like why wandering around at midnight like a ninja, or why unsheathing her sword over a minor inconvenience is a big no-no. But trust me, the journey to transform this ancient Tang dynasty woman into a modern 21st century individual is going to be wild. The story kicks off on a rainy evening in a metropolitan city. The streets are alive with bustling crowds, car horns, and a torrential downpour. Amidst all this chaos, Su Qing stands out as the only guy running around without an umbrella. His drenched hair clings to his face as he rushes to his dorm building for shelter. Soaked to the bone, Su begins climbing the stairs to his apartment. But halfway up, he hears strange murmurs echoing through the dim stairwell. Weird. Who's out here in this rain, he wonders. And then, boom, his heart skips a beat. Standing just a few steps above him is a young woman, staring straight at him with an intense gaze. Her presence feels eerie, almost otherworldly. In his startled state, Su Qing fumbles and drops his room key. The woman steps back slightly, clearly wary of him. At first glance, he dismisses her as a cosplayer. After all, her attire looks straight out of a period drama. But something about her outfit feels too authentic. The intricate embroidery, the heavy fabric, even the old-world aura, it all seems oddly real. Shaking off the strange vibe, Su Qing brushes past her and resumes climbing the stairs. Just as he's about to enter his room, the woman calls out, her voice carrying a hint of desperation. She asks him to hold up. Turning back, Su Qing casually explains that this is where he lives. But her response is peculiar. She looks spooked, almost like she's seeing a ghost, and takes a step back, maintaining her cautious distance. Su Qing scratches the back of his head awkwardly, wondering, do I look that rough? Does she think I'm some kind of creep? Embarrassed, he retreats into his apartment. Inside, Su Qing sighs and kicks off his soaked slippers. He changes out of his drenched shirt and heads straight for a steamy shower. A hot bath and a can of cola later, he finally starts to unwind. As he calls out to his cat, Melon, the little fur ball comes prancing in, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Su Qing smiles as she digs into her meal, her fluffy tail wagging happily. Meanwhile, he takes a big gulp of his fizzy drink, savoring the moment. But his relaxation doesn't last long. Curiosity gets the better of him, and he sneaks a glance through the peephole of his door. To his surprise, the mysterious girl is no longer there. Maybe she finally left, he mutters to himself. Opening the door cautiously, Su Qing steps out to confirm her absence. But as soon as he swings the door wide open, there she is, standing right in front of him, drenched and silent. Feeling a bit awkward, Su Qing offers her an umbrella, hoping she'll take it and head home. But she doesn't respond. Instead, she asks a simple yet baffling question. Where am I? Su Qing raises an eyebrow. Biwang Road? My neighborhood, he answers hesitantly. But the girl's puzzled expression only deepens. After a brief silence, she asks, Who are you? Now thoroughly confused, Su Qing stammers. Just a regular guy. Still unsure of what's going on, he tries again, offering her the umbrella. Our clueless protagonist, Su Qing, stands awkwardly in his doorway, holding out an umbrella to the strange girl. She stares at it like it's some alien artifact, completely baffled by its existence. After an uncomfortable silence, she finally speaks, introducing herself as Zhang He, a member of the prestigious Yin clan. She admits she has no idea how she ended up here. Su Qing scratches his head, trying to process what she just said. Yin clan? Is this some kind of cosplay backstory? He wonders. Exhausted by the sheer weirdness of the situation, he sighs and motions for her to step inside. Inside his modest apartment, Su Qing tries to figure out what to do next. He decides to call the building guard, hoping to get some assistance with this peculiar guest. As he dials, Zhang He's attention is drawn to the TV. An advertisement pops up on the screen, colorful and loud. Before Su Qing can explain, she leaps into action. Drawing her sword in a flash, she strikes the TV with a precise, clean slice. Sparks fly, the screen cracks, and Su Qing freezes in shock. Her face is pale, her hands trembling as she backs away from the shattered TV. muttering about dark magic. To her, the moving images must seem like some unholy sorcery that needed immediate destruction. The guard's voice crackles through the phone, asking about the strange noise in the background. Su can barely find words, stammering something about a little incident. Before he can explain, Jang He whirls around and locks her intense, bloodshot gaze on him. The guard, sensing the tension through the phone, mutters something about calling back later and abruptly hangs up. Su Qing lets out a frustrated sigh, his head spinning with questions. He tries to break the ice by asking where she's from. Meanwhile, Jang He, still reeling from the magic box, points to the remnants of the TV and demands to know if the people trapped inside it are dead. Her confusion doesn't end there. She eyes Su Qing's phone suspiciously, wondering if the brick he was speaking to contains more trapped souls. Su Qing groans, glancing down at her straw sandals. If she's from some cosplay convention, how is she going to afford to replace my TV? He mutters to himself. Finally, taking a deep breath, he raises his hands in a calming gesture. Okay, listen. I'm not going to hurt you. Let's just put the sword down. Jang He hesitates, but eventually retrieves her sword from the broken TV and sheaths it. Su Qing asks for her name and where she's from again. She repeats confidently, I am Jang He, a disciple of the Yin clan. He chuckles nervously, trying to lighten the mood. Yin clan, huh? That's a cool name. Is your clan rich enough to cover my TV damages? Jang He tilts her head, puzzled. You don't know the Yin clan? The Gusi Yin clan? Su Qing shrugs, admitting he's never heard of them. Her expression shifts from confusion to offense. She stares at him as if he's just insulted her ancestors. Sensing the growing tension, Su Qing raises his hands again in a placating gesture. Look, I didn't mean anything by it. Ask me anything you want. I'll try to help. Her expression softens, and she timidly admits, I just want to return to the Yin clan. Su Qing sighs. Well, you're in Jiangchen City. Does that mean anything to you? Jang He stays silent, her brows furrowed. Su Qing scratches his head, growing increasingly uneasy. Don't tell me she's actually from ancient times? That's impossible, right? Desperate to make sense of her odd behavior, he decides to test her. Okay, tell me this. Who's your emperor? Jang He looks at him as if he's asked her the most obvious question in the world. The emperor everyone should know, of course. Su Qing blinks. Could you be more specific? Who exactly is everyone should know? Her answer, or lack thereof, leaves Su Qing speechless. She stares at him, clearly baffled by his ignorance. As their conversation continues, the girl hesitantly asks Su Qing if it's currently the 16th year of Kaiyuan. Her question makes him freeze in shock. Intrigued, Su Qing quickly pulls out his phone and starts searching for information. To his amazement, he finds that the 16th year of Kaiyuan corresponds to the reign of Emperor Xuanzong of the Tang dynasty, one of the longest reigning emperors in Chinese history. To test her claim further, Su Qing casually asks if she knows figures like Li Longji or other famous personalities from that era. Her face lights up with excitement, and she eagerly asks where she can find them. Su Qing stifles a laugh and jokingly says, you might see them in a Chinese mobile game. Before their conversation can continue, the sound of someone at the door interrupts them. A delivery man calls out, announcing the arrival of food. The girl immediately reaches for her sword, ready to confront the so-called intruder. Su Qing panics and rushes to calm her down, waving his hands frantically. No, it's just a delivery guy bringing food. He's not a threat. Lady Jang pauses, but still looks wary. A servant? She asks. Su Qing sighs and explains, not exactly. He's just here to drop off food I ordered. As the delivery man hands over the food, Lady Jang watches the entire process with a mix of curiosity and confusion, her eyes wide as if witnessing some kind of sorcery. Su Qing sets the food down and asks if she's hungry. Want to try something? It's good, he offers. But Lady Jang nervously shakes her head, stepping back toward the door. She glances around the apartment, and then, out of nowhere, asks, why does everyone here have such short hair? Are you all exiles? Su Qing almost chokes on air, caught off guard by the bizarre question. He reassures her with a nervous laugh. No, it's just a fashion thing. Trust me, we're not exiles. His mind starts to wander. Wait, what if she did attack someone when she first got here? His pulse quickens, and he blurts out, you didn't hurt anyone, did you? Lady Jang quickly denies it, explaining she was only hiding in the shadows to avoid being seen. Relieved, Su Qing takes a deep breath and unwraps his burger, taking a big bite. But before he can enjoy his meal, Lady Jang steps closer, her eyes fixed on the food. "What is that?" she asks, pointing at the burger. Su Qing, still chewing, mumbles, "It's just food." "A burger. You want some?" She shakes her head firmly, but doesn't move her gaze from the sandwich. Su Qing shrugs and picks up a can of soda. "If you're not hungry, at least try this. It's super sweet. You've probably never had anything like it." Lady Jang's expression hardens. "Are you mocking me?" she snaps, glaring at him. "No, no," Su says quickly, waving his hands in defense. "I'm just offering. That's all." Their bickering escalates, with Lady Jang accusing him of being disrespectful and Su trying to explain himself. In the middle of their squabble, Su Qing accidentally knocks over his can of soda, and the fizzy liquid spills across the floor. Lady Jang's eyes widen in horror as she watches the bubbling drink spread. "What is this black, disgusting substance? Were you trying to poison me?" Su Qing starts sweating bullets, shaking his head furiously. "It's not poison. It's just a drink. Look, I'll prove it." Before she can draw her sword again, Su Qing grabs another can, opens it, and takes a big gulp. "See? Totally fine." Lady Jang lowers her blade, but keeps a wary eye on the soda. Su Qing exhales in relief, muttering, "Seriously, can you stop pulling your sword out every time something weird happens? You're scaring my cat." As if on cue, his cat, Melon, peeks out from under the couch, her fur bristling. Su Qing looks at Lady Jang and begins weighing his options. "Okay, how do I deal with her?" Option 1. Trick her into going outside and hope she figures things out on her own. But no, she'll probably end up on the news or worse. Option 2. Call the cops. Yeah, great idea, until she freaks out and starts slicing up the officers. Nope, hard pass. Option 3. Keep her here. Maybe I can learn something from her. Ancient kung fu techniques, secret Tang dynasty recipes? Could be cool. Unless, of course, she decides to chop me in half someday. After a moment of contemplation, Su Qing lets out a resigned sigh. "All right," he mutters, looking at her. "Guess you're staying. Let's see how this goes." With that settled, Su Qing offers her the burger once again. The sight of the tantalizing food seems to make her hesitate, but she stubbornly looks away, asking, "What exactly is this thing you're holding?" Determined to prove it's not poisonous, Su Qing takes a big bite. She watches him closely, her eyes sharp and intense, before finally nodding. "Go ahead," she tells him. As he chews, she seems to carefully observe every movement, as if trying to decode this strange food. Seeing how interested she is, Su Qing realizes the burger might not be enough to satisfy her, so he suggests making a rice bowl instead. Maybe her ancient stomach can't handle this modern food. I should make something more familiar for her, he thinks. However, deep down, he knows it's just an excuse. He's the one who wants more food. As he finishes the burger, Lady Jang's irritation is obvious. She's clearly annoyed that he ate it so quickly, not even offering her a taste. Su Qing gestures for her to sit down, but she hesitates, cautiously pressing her hand against the chair to test it first. She clearly doesn't trust him fully, despite the kindness he's shown by offering her the umbrella. His room is filled with strange things, and he eats odd foods. Who knows what else could be hidden in this unfamiliar world? Once she sits down, she carefully surveys her surroundings. "Where exactly am I?" she asks again, her voice laced with uncertainty. Su Qing calmly reminds her, "You're in Jiangcheng City." Lady Jang's eyes brighten with hope. "Do you know how I can return home?" Su Qing's heart skips a beat when he sees her reach for her sword again. He quickly raises his hands, urging her to put it down before he answers. After a tense moment, the sword is back in its sheath, and Su Qing sighs deeply. He looks at her solemnly and begins to explain. "You may not be able to go back," he says softly. "We're really far from your home." Lady Jang's face tightens, and she asks, "How far?" Su hesitates, but finally says, "About 1,200 years away." The words hit her like a punch. She stares at him in disbelief. "What do you mean by 1,200 years?" He explains, "It's been that long since you came from your time. People like Li Bai, Yang Yuan, and Lu Shan, legends from your era, are long gone. They've been dead for over 1,000 years. Lady Jang's eyes widened in shock. She doesn't believe it. "You're lying," she snaps, shaking her head in disbelief. Su Qing remains calm and gestures around the room. "Just look around. Nothing's the same. This world runs on its own rules now. Sure, it might be cool once you get the hang of it, but it's also risky." Despite his explanation, Lady Jang still isn't convinced. In a burst of frustration, She draws her sword again and points it at his face. Su Qing stays calm, his voice steady. You might want to stop waving that sword around. It's against the law, you know? You should learn the rules around here. Lady Jiang pauses, considering his words, and then asks, why are you even bothering to help me? Su Qing scratches his head, trying to find the right words. Well, it's kind of like how I helped my fat cat, Melon. She was struggling in the outside world, and I felt like I had to help her. The words come out wrong, and Lady Jiang's face tightens in irritation. You're comparing me to a cat? Realizing his mistake, Su Qing quickly tries to clarify. No. I mean, I didn't think twice about helping you because you were in trouble just like Melon. You're not like a cat, I swear. Lady Jiang stands there, fuming for a moment. But then, after a pause, she calms down a little. Her sharp gaze softens. All right, maybe you're not such a bad guy. You let me in. You offered food. That's more than most people would do. So, why did you help me? Our hero chuckles, saying that meeting such a quirky, ancient girl like her isn't something he experiences every day. He's genuinely curious about her, and he adds, if our roles were reversed, you'd probably be just as curious about me. Lady Jiang quickly shuts him down. If someone as strange as you showed up in my era, the chief would have chopped you down right away. Su Qing reminds her, this era is all about peace and love. No need for any violence. As long as you're here, you've got to follow the rules. Don't hurt anyone, and definitely don't destroy anything. He gives her one final reminder before turning away. If you want my help, it's yours. But if you prefer to wander off on your own, that's up to you. Just don't hurt anyone, or you'll get arrested. Lady Jiang finds herself in a tough spot. She doesn't want to stay, but she doesn't have many options left. Su Qing sighs and offers, if you want to stay here, I can order you some food, but you have to leave your sword behind. I don't want to get arrested either. Reluctantly, she throws her sword down with a heavy sigh. With that settled, Su Qing starts brainstorming. What kind of food could he order that wouldn't be too strange for her? He briefly considers mooncakes, but quickly changes his mind. Rice and buns seem like a safer bet. He tells her, why don't you take a shower while we wait for the food to arrive? Lady Jiang is clueless. Where am I supposed to bathe? She asks. Su Qing leads her into the bathroom, and she's amazed at the sight. Don't be too shocked, he says. There are plenty of surprises here, and everything's safe. He points to the shower and explains, this is how you wash yourself. She looks at it like a curious puppy and, after a moment, tries it out. Su Qing can't resist capturing her curious expression on his phone. He introduces her to shampoo and the concept of a toilet. She's bewildered, but intrigued. Su Qing waits outside, rummaging through his things to find something suitable for her to wear. In the midst of this, he accidentally opens the bathroom door while knocking. Realizing she doesn't know how to lock it, he informs her that there are no women's clothes available, so she'll have to wait for new ones. He teaches her how to lock the door, and she kicks him out. As she enjoys her first ever shower in this modern world, Su Qing wonders if all of this is real. He picks up her sword and examines it carefully, considering having an expert check if it's authentic. Lady Jiang emerges from the bath, now dressed in a new outfit. As Su Qing continues with his task, she notices what he's writing and asks, what are you doing? He hands her the paper. It lists various modern-day issues that she needs to get used to. They're everyday products she will need to use in her daily life. Lady Jiang looks over the list, then complains about the clothes she's wearing. Su Qing, without thinking, compliments her. You look pretty. She immediately freezes. Don't get any funny ideas, she warns sternly. No flirtatious remarks? Su Qing, slightly embarrassed, quickly clarifies. I'm not hitting on you. It's just a compliment. That's what people do when someone looks good. Just then, he notices her straw slippers. Those are a bit outdated. I'll get you new ones tomorrow. Promise. As Su Qing admires Lady Jiang's cuteness, a sudden knock on the door startles her. She tenses, but Su quickly reassures her. It's just the delivery boy with the food. Su Qing can't help but think of her like a wildcat, always alert, ready to pounce at any moment. He smiles to himself before taking the food out of the plastic bag and handing it to her. Lady Jiang hesitates for a moment, then remembers something her vice captain once told her. If someone's helping you for free, they must have an ulterior motive. Hearing this, Su Qing looks at her, slightly hurt, but she suddenly smiles at him and says, but I believe you're actually a good person. A bit stunned by her change in attitude, Su Qing sighs with relief. He watches her finish her food, and then decides to have a serious talk with her. Lady Jiang, he starts, you're not in the primitive era anymore. You need to adjust your way of thinking. If you keep relying on that sword for survival, and worse, end up killing me, you wouldn't last a week out here before running out of food. He gives her a pointed look. You need to stop playing with that sword. There are better ways to survive here, like using the TV for entertainment. He gestures to the TV on the table. The smartphone is useful too. Trust me, you're safe here. No one is going to harm you. Lady Jiang nods slowly, and Su Qing feels relieved, but then the conversation turns to more serious matters. This world is peaceful, but things can get dangerous for you if you're not careful. Su Qing explains. For example, if you walked into a royal castle with your sword out, they'd probably throw you in jail. Same goes for anywhere else in the world right now. Lady Jiang listens, her curiosity piqued. What do you mean? Why would that happen? Su Qing continues. It's because there are rules now. You also need something called an ID card to prove who you are. Cops might stop you and ask for it. So, the first thing I need to do is help you get one, or you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. Lady Jiang is confused. Am I like some kind of refugee here? Su Qing shakes his head. It's actually worse. The consequences are serious if you get caught without an ID. It's not just about fitting in, it's about keeping yourself safe. Lady Jiang's eyes widened in fear. Su Qing quickly tries to calm her down. Look, meeting someone from 1200 years ago isn't exactly something that happens every day. I'll help you, but you've got to cooperate with me. She remains hesitant, still not sure she can trust him. I just want to go back home, she mutters. Su Qing sighs. I know, but it won't be easy for me to help you if you don't cooperate. Our best shot is for you to follow my lead. Lady Jiang reluctantly agrees, asking, what do I do first? Su Qing doesn't waste any time. First off, never pull out that sword again. They fall into a brief silence, and Lady Jiang suddenly looks around, her curiosity returning. Where's your wife? She asks, clearly hoping to find someone she can gossip with. Su Qing freezes, then awkwardly admits, I'm actually unmarried. Lady Jiang is taken aback. A quiet pause fills the room. Su Qing quickly reassures her. It's normal for someone my age to be unmarried. Don't worry about it. Trying to change the subject, he gestures toward a door. I've got a spare room for you. You can make yourself comfortable there. Lady Jiang nods quietly and follows him as he leads her to the new room. The room. It's full of stuff, but Su Qing quickly tidies up, making just enough space for her to sleep comfortably. It's clear she's not exactly thrilled to be staying in this place, especially with someone as weird as him. Still, Su Qing grabs some spare blankets and arranges them neatly on the bed, encouraging her to rest. He knows she must be feeling confused, and he hopes that when they wake up tomorrow, it'll all feel like a dream. Before leaving the room, he introduces himself properly as Su Qing, wishes her good night, and steps out, leaving her alone to settle in. Lady Jiang first places her sword beside the bed, then sits down, staring at the cozy bed. When midnight strikes, Su Qing finds himself awake, restless, reflecting on the chaos of the day. He had been rejected in job interviews. Then it started raining, but somehow, he made it home, only to meet a girl who draws her sword every time she feels threatened. He shakes his head and decides to put it all out of his mind. Forget it, he mutters, then goes back to sleep. Tomorrow, he has a lot to handle. The next morning, Su Qing wakes up and checks his phone. It's already 10 a.m. He jolts awake, suddenly remembering the strange lady. Panicking, he looks around and spots her sitting there, which confirms that it wasn't just a dream. He gathers himself, smiles, and wishes her a good morning, asking why she's up so early. She reminds him, it's almost noon. Su Qing, trying to get back on track, asks if she's hungry. She nods, though she says, a little. Suddenly, she starts rummaging around her chest, then hurries back to her room. She returns, holding 2 silver pieces and hands them to him, saying, you can use these to buy food. Su Qing stares at the silver in his hands, amazed. He knows silver isn't worth much, but he thinks if she has any gold, I could exchange that for cash, and maybe even help her get an ID card. She pulls out another piece of stone, but Su Qing quickly tells her to keep it, reminding her she can't go outside yet. He looks her over, estimating her size, and promises, I'll buy you some clothes later. I'll bring back food too. With that, he heads to the bathroom to freshen up. Once ready, he heads to the shopping center to pick out some clothes for her. After browsing through several options, his eyes settle on a dress, and he tells the attendant, I'll take that one. While shopping, he spots some bras in the distance but hesitates. I can't buy those alone, he thinks, feeling embarrassed. After about an hour, he finishes his shopping, holding a few bags of women's clothes and cosmetics. He's not thrilled about carrying them, but it's necessary. Next, he heads to a bookstore, picks up a few books, and makes his way back to the apartment. The city is bustling, but he's focused on getting back. As he reaches the entrance of his building, the guard stops him, eyeing his shopping bags. Su-ching tries to hide the feminine items, but the guard notices. "What's with all the shopping?" he asks. Su-ching, trying to cover, says, "Oh, I dialed the wrong number yesterday. That was a mistake." The guard raises an eyebrow, but then warns him, "Be careful. There's been some thefts around here lately." Su-ching nods, offering a smile, and reassures the guard, "Don't worry, I'll keep that in mind." Once Su-ching gets back to his apartment, he finds the lady standing in a defensive stance, her sword almost drawn, ready to defend herself from any intruders. He quickly reassures her that she's safe and hands over the food box, mentioning he also brought some essentials. As he watches her, something clicks in his mind, and he looks at her curiously. She notices and asks what's on his mind. He awkwardly wonders aloud, "Should you be thanking me? Seeing me as some kind of young hero or a decent guy, or something like that?" The lady, not fully understanding his train of thought, thanks him anyway. It seems like it might take a while for her to figure out what this strange guy is thinking. They dig into the food, and she devours her meal like a wild animal, surprising Su-ching. He had expected a more elegant woman from her era, but he's pleased to see her enjoying herself. After they finish eating, Su-ching lays out the clothes he bought, showing her the new dresses and shoes. As he digs around for more stuff, the lady spots the bra he bought for her. Su-ching freaks out, as if his soul might escape from his virgin body. He quickly tells her to keep the bra down and promises to send her a video explaining how to use it. Feeling flustered, he dumps all the stuff he bought and tells her to figure it out herself. He also brought some books to help her understand this world and its culture better. Su-ching plans to teach her how to use a computer so she can learn on her own. Noticing she looks tired, he suggests she get plenty of sleep before they figure out their next move. The lady then asks about his status in this world, prompting Su-ching to rethink his response. He admits he's a graduate student still on the job hunt. It's funny how, despite being unemployed, he's still able to splurge on fancy clothes and cosmetics. The lady begins to think he might be some rich kid, but Su-ching quickly shuts that down, saying he comes from a poor background. Then, she wonders if he could be a landlord or something. Su-ching, feeling the need to change the subject, watches her as she dives into the books. However, when she flips through some pages and sees pictures from her era, tears well up in her eyes as she starts thinking about how she can get back home. Su-ching, trying to keep the mood light, reminds her that he has no idea how to get her back but asks, "How did you end up here?" The lady reveals that she was chasing a small thief in the heavy rain, got lost in the middle of the forest, and wandered around until she spotted these tall buildings. Su-ching, while still clueless about how to help her get back home, cleverly changes the subject. "Before you can go back, you've got to survive in this world," he says, then asks, "What's your military ranking and martial arts skills?" The reason he asks is that he's secretly curious about her martial arts abilities. Su-ching is thoroughly impressed as the lady confidently explains her martial arts skills. She reveals that her Yin clan is the most powerful clan around, and when he asks how high she can jump without getting hurt, she points to the 4th floor of the building, saying she could jump from there without a scratch. Su-ching's eyes practically pop out of his head at the revelation. Excited, he eagerly asks to see all her fancy moves, spouting off names of martial arts moves he probably picked up from video games. However, it's all gibberish to her. He even asks if she knows kung fu and offers to learn from her, but she quickly tells him to calm down, reminding him that he's past the age for learning, and no matter how determined he is, he won't achieve much. Su-ching, slightly deflated, asks if the moves are super strict, but the lady shakes her head, explaining that it's not about being a master, just a few basic moves without all the rigid rules. She then gets in a position and shows him the first simple martial arts move, focusing on the waist and grounding yourself. She explains that martial arts training takes time, built bit by bit, day by day. Su-ching, still eager, asks if he can practice stakes, literally begging her. She reminds him that it would take 3 years to learn the basics, and he quickly decides that in that time, he could become a full-fledged soldier. So, he gives up on martial arts and asks her to teach him sword techniques instead. Once again, the lady brings him back to reality, telling him he's past the time to perfect his reflexes since his eyes can't keep up with his hands. Su-ching finally abandons the idea of becoming a warrior and simply tells her to try on the clothes he bought her. While she's in the bathroom, Su-ching can't resist the opportunity. He grabs her sword and starts swinging it around like he's some ninja, but he quickly realizes the sword is way too heavy for his puny muscles. When the lady finally emerges from the bathroom, looking smoking hot in her new outfit, Su Qing is left in awe. The clothes fit her perfectly, and she checks herself out, making sure they aren't too tight anywhere. It's at this moment Su Qing remembers that he forgot to buy her a hairband. He tells her to tie her hair back with a band, and once she does, she looks even hotter. Overcome with emotion, Su Qing starts crying, feeling bad for underestimating her intelligence just because she's from ancient times. He decides to take her for a walk that night and promises to buy her a proper hair tie while they're out. As dusk settled in, the girl peeked outside her room and saw our boy sitting at his desk, completely absorbed in his screen. Curiosity got the better of her, and she stepped out, asking what he was up to. Without looking away, he tried to explain computers to her in the simplest way possible, like how you could trash talk everyone in the crazy lobbies of Call of Duty. He even threw in a warning, telling her to stay far away from 4chan if she wanted to keep her sanity intact. Switching topics, he asked if she was having fun reading all those books. She let out a small sigh, admitting that most of it was flying right over her head, but she was slowly getting the hang of it. The boy chuckled and told her to take it easy, reassuring her that there was no rush. He reminded her that she was already brave and smart, and joked that if he were in her place, he'd probably be a lost cause by now. Hearing this, Lady Jang glanced at him warmly, her cheeks turning a soft shade of red. As he relaxed at his desk, completely unaware of her lingering gaze, she sneaked up behind him again and asked if he didn't have to work. He simply shrugged, saying he was already hustling to make money in this world. But when she tried to picture someone making money, the last thing that came to mind was a guy sitting in front of a giant screen, looking like he was doing nothing. With a smirk, he explained that he was trying to make some quick cash online, though he knew all the text and numbers wouldn't make sense to her. Instead, he suggested she start with the basics. Just then an idea struck him. He asked how strong her chief's martial arts skills were, and without hesitation, she proudly replied that he was incredibly strong. Seizing the moment, the boy pulled up a video on his screen and asked if the fighters in the clip looked powerful enough. Lady Jang's eyes widened with excitement as she watched the intense fight scenes unfold before her. The boy, just as enthusiastic, leaned in and asked for her thoughts. In a timid voice, she admitted that she had never seen anything like it in her life. Just imagining such warriors made her nervous enough to pray. Grinning mischievously, he clicked on another video, this time showing a guy smashing through an entire wall with just the palm of his hand. As soon as she saw it, terror washed over her face. Trembling, she turned to him with a shaky voice and asked if everyone in this world possessed such magnificent power. Trying not to laugh, he quickly reassured her that it was all fake, nothing but fiction. But that only made her more suspicious. Narrowing her eyes, she demanded to know if he was really telling the truth. The boy nodded firmly, repeating that all the kung fu she had just seen was total nonsense. He went on to explain that in his world, people created things purely from their imagination. The martial arts she saw in the videos were simply how people believed it should look, over the top and exaggerated. Slowly but surely, Lady Jang seemed to be grasping these new ideas. Seeing her thoughtful expression, he reassured her that with time, she'd come to understand everything about arts and movies. Su Qing finally asked the question that had been on his mind. Was her chief's kung fu better than what he had seen so far? She hesitated for a moment, but eventually admitted that it wasn't. Not satisfied, he asked about flying techniques. She confirmed they existed, but most people specialized in just one. She even pointed out how unrealistic those flashy movie stunts were, reminding him that physical strength had its limits. Su Qing thought for a moment, then pulled up another video and asked if she could pull off that move. She considered it, then stood up from her seat and, without warning, started swinging her hands at an incredible speed, moving so fast that she seemed like a blur. Su Qing's eyes widened in amazement, completely thrilled to see her nail the technique. Excitedly, he told her she had it down perfectly. She simply smiled and told him to reach out anytime if he wanted to learn, promising to teach him. With that, she headed out, leaving him grinning from ear to ear, probably already imagining himself as a martial arts master someday. As she walked to her room, a fat cat sat in her way, staring at her expectantly. But she ignored the little fur ball and shut the door right in its face. Once inside, she let out a deep sigh, fear creeping into her heart. There was no one in this world without ulterior motives, after all. It dawned on her, the only reason Su Qing was helping her was to learn martial arts. This strange new world felt overwhelming, and none of it made any sense to her. Her gaze drifted to the wide ceiling, and with a determined look, she grabbed her sword and started practicing. The sounds from her room piqued Su Qing's curiosity. Wasn't she going to take a nap? Feeling drained, he collapsed on his bed, still finding it unbelievable that there was a woman in the room next to his. The thought alone made him ridiculously happy, and with those sweet thoughts filling his mind, he dozed off. Suddenly, loud voices jolted him awake. He glanced outside. It was already dusk. Checking his phone, he realized he had slept through the entire day. Jumping out of bed, he decided to take Lady Jing out to show her the real world outside. As she put on her shoes, he laid down the ground rules, insisting she shouldn't do anything without his permission. He warned her about the do's and don'ts of public areas, making sure she understood everything. She meekly nodded and replied with a soft yes. Before stepping out, Su Qing made sure to snap a quick photo of her, just in case. In the photo, however, Lady Zhang's pretty face looked anything but charming. Instead, she resembled a shady molester eagerly eyeing some peachy sights on the street. The boy, hoping to lighten the mood, asked her to give him a smile. But her forced grin turned out even worse than her usual expression, making him nearly pass out on the spot. Deciding to abandon the picture idea altogether, he quickly suggested they should just get going. Before heading out, he cautiously told her to leave her sword behind, not wanting to attract any trouble. Lady Jing, of course, refused right away. But the boy reassured her, confidently stating that the people outside were as weak as he was, so she didn't need to worry. After some hesitation, she reluctantly handed over the sword. While she stood there, he sneakily snapped another picture, this time managing to get a really good shot. Feeling satisfied, he cheerfully declared it was time to leave. Stepping out of the apartment building, Lady Jing's eyes darted around nervously. The boy noticed and casually explained that this was just an ordinary neighborhood where families lived. He pointed out the main entrance, the road outside, and the stores lining both sides, where people could buy food, clothes, or whatever they needed. Just then, her attention locked onto a guy riding a scooter. Her face filled with awe, as if she thought it was some kind of magical ride. As they continued walking, they passed a few people, and that's when trouble started brewing. A chubby woman spotted Lady Zhang and immediately recognized her. Panicked, the girl hid behind the boy, while the woman insisted she had seen her somewhere before. At the same time, a nearby security guard, noticing their closeness, teasingly asked if the boy had finally snagged himself a girlfriend. Laughing it off, he casually replied that she was just a friend. But the fat lady wasn't giving up so easily. She suddenly pointed at Lady Jing and confidently announced that she was the sword-wielding woman from yesterday. The guard's curiosity piqued, and the two started discussing the incident in detail. Before things could get worse, our boy quickly jumped in, yelling that it was just cosplay, where people dressed up as fictional or historical characters for fun. Luckily, the woman seemed to buy the explanation, nodding in understanding. Not wasting a second, the boy grabbed Lady Jing's hand and swiftly walked away. Watching them leave together brought a nostalgic smile to an old man nearby, who was reminded of his own youth. Once they were safely out of sight, Lady Jing abruptly pulled her hand away, looking a little grumpy. Curious, the boy asked if that woman had really seen her yesterday, but she remained silent. Her reaction was enough for him to guess that she must have run into the lady on the stairs before. Shrugging it off, they continued their journey through the bustling streets. As they walked, Lady Jing's eyes widened in amazement at the sight of cars speeding past. Shocked by their speed and size, she couldn't hide her disbelief. The boy chuckled and gave her a quick rundown on how cars had evolved from horse-drawn carriages into these powerful machines. But the explanation didn't quite convince her. With a serious expression, she concluded that there must be a horse trapped inside each car, providing the much-needed horsepower to make it run. Then our boy introduces Lady Jing to the concept of cameras, explaining how the movies they watch were filmed using these devices. He points to a nearby CCTV camera and tells her that if he were to misbehave with her right now, people from far away would be watching and could get them arrested. Reassuring her, he adds that as long as she behaves herself, she isn't their target. Lady Jing picks up a few pebbles from the ground, eyeing the cameras suspiciously. But before she can act, the boy quickly warns her not to even think about knocking out any cameras. She stops immediately, and he calmly tells her to put the stones away. Moving on, he explains how traffic lights work, pointing at the signals and telling her that red means stop and green means it's safe to cross. Sharing all this, he mentions that he's explaining it not just for her, but also for my viewers' friends to learn too. Yes, I'm talking about you guys. Once they cross the road, Lady Jing's attention is completely captivated by the bright streetlights and bustling grocery stores. The high-speed cars zooming past fascinate her even more. As they continue walking, the boy notices a hair ribbon in a nearby shop and picks it up for her. But as he imagines her wearing it, those cute fur balls on her head make him rethink whether it would suit her. He stands there, lost in thought, scanning through the cute and sparkly items displayed in front of them. Lady Jang, however, perks up with excitement, and when he asks if she likes a particular ribbon, she immediately says yes. Holding it in her hands, she stretches it vigorously at first, but soon she figures out how to use it properly and puts it on. Looking cute and beautiful, even the boy can't help but admire her. As the sun sets and the city lights up, the duo heads into a restaurant. Our boy orders 2 plates of fried rice cakes with extra spices and a side of sliced cucumber. While looking for a place to sit, he tells Jang that this is the very place where all their food comes from. He trusts this restaurant completely because they serve the best food, and he's been enjoying it since he was a kid. Lady Jang, however, seems completely mesmerized by the vibrant lights around them, so much so that she's startled when the waiter suddenly arrives with their food. The boy starts eating right away and offers her a pair of chopsticks. She looks nervous, hesitating as she holds them awkwardly. As he gulps down his lemon juice, he realizes that letting her wander off alone might not have been the best idea. She clearly needs more guidance than he initially thought. But he's confident he can teach her everything step by step. After they finish eating and pay the bill, they leave the restaurant feeling satisfied, especially our boy, who's pleased with how the evening turned out. Once they arrived back home, he glanced at her and asked if she was starting to feel more comfortable. She didn't say a word, simply sitting quietly on the couch, lost in thought. Trying to lighten the mood, he reassured her that living in this world wasn't so bad, especially with all the delicious food and endless junk snacks to munch on. He added that once she had her own ID card, she'd be able to enjoy life here even more. But despite his efforts, she still didn't look too thrilled. In a soft voice, she murmured that she wanted to go home. But once again, he reminded her of the harsh truth. Her home no longer existed. It had already been 1,200 years, and there was no going back. Reality was sinking in whether she liked it or not. After a long pause, she finally asked how they were going to solve the issue of her identity. He admitted he wasn't some government official who could handle it easily, but there was always a way. With a confident smile, he assured her that he'd figure something out. Hearing his words, she looked a little flustered but grateful for his kindness. This time, she properly thanked him, calling him a young warrior. Amused, he responded with the same brotherly energy, reminding her that identity was crucial in this world. Without it, life would be nearly impossible to navigate. He then asked where the list he had given her yesterday was. She pointed towards the dustbin. Disappointed, he told her to retrieve it immediately. As she dug the crumpled paper out of the trash, she glanced at him and asked what they would do if the ID card issue couldn't be resolved. Without hesitation, he pointed out the harsh reality. Without an ID, she'd be considered a criminal. There wouldn't be much he could do to help. No ID meant no job, no property, not even the ability to use public transport. He emphasized that in this world, an ID card was the ultimate key to survival. Hearing this, a spark of an idea flashed across her face. She asked if making money and finding a place to live would make the ID less important. But he shook his head, explaining that even with money, there were still countless things she wouldn't be able to do, like opening a bank account, getting a phone, or even shopping online. The list was endless. As they talked, he opened his laptop and searched for an unregistered resident certificate, suggesting that she could also try approaching the authorities directly for help. He reassured her that at worst, they might confiscate her, but he was certain they would treat her well. At the mention of authorities, Lady Zhang's expression changed instantly. Without missing a beat, she reached for her sword, eyeing him suspiciously as if he was planning to turn her in. He quickly waved her off, telling her to forget about it and focus on studying first. He suggested she start by learning some history or anything that would help her understand modern society better. Once she had a basic grasp, she could decide what to do next. For a moment, she fell silent, her face filled with a mix of anxiety and sadness. She hesitated for a moment before asking if it would be a problem for him if she stayed here. Our hero smiled and reassured her that she could crash here as long as she wanted. But there was one condition. She shouldn't fight or kill with her sword. He promised everything would be fine without it. Just then, the cat strolled over, rubbing against his leg. He realized he had almost forgotten to feed the little furball in all the madness. With a chuckle, he played around with the cat for a bit before turning to Lady Jang and suggesting that if she had nothing better to do, she could try studying. Without a word, she bowed her head, and decided to follow his advice. Meanwhile, our boy scrolled through the internet, but it didn't seem like he found anything worthwhile. That's when he decided to call someone he knew, his best friend, Chin Hao, who was now a police officer. Though he wasn't entirely sure if Chin Hao's internship had ended and if he had officially become a full-blown officer, he figured it was worth a call. As he typed out a message, he briefly considered telling him about meeting a girl from 1200 years ago, but quickly decided against it. Instead, he set up a casual meetup without revealing anything unusual. Feeling content with his plans, he decided to take a shower to freshen up. The warm, steamy bath left him feeling completely satisfied. Just as he wrapped up, a thought crossed his mind. Lady Jing hadn't showered yet. He shook the thought away, not wanting to dwell on it. However, it suddenly hit him that he was sharing his space with a girl. If she caught him wandering around naked, things could get really awkward. Thankfully, he managed to slip into his room without incident. A while later, Lady Jing cautiously peeked out of her room. Clutching her clothes tightly, she darted toward the bathroom and shut the door behind her for a much-needed bath. It seemed like she still followed her old routines, just as she did in ancient times. Since it was the weekend, the boy decided to teach her something new. He grabbed a digital writing pad and began showing her how to write. Lady Jang was already quite skilled at reading traditional Chinese characters and their pronunciation, so she was eager to try her hand at writing. Just as she was getting the hang of it, their focus shifted when Melon, the cat, suddenly popped up, meowing for attention. Noticing the cat's hungry eyes, the boy decided it was time to feed her. While he dished out the cat food, Lady Jang watched curiously and asked what it actually was. He explained that it was special food made just for cats to eat. Lady Jang listened intently, then, in her mind, started picturing how such food might be produced. She imagined pouches filled with cat food hanging from tall trees, swaying gently in the breeze, as if nature itself provided meals for the furry creatures. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. The boy quickly rushed over and received the food delivery. Handing it to the lady, he told her it was her dinner for the night, adding that he'd be heading out soon to meet his friend and ask about her identity card. Without wasting a second, the girl eagerly started digging into the food. Watching her, the boy reassured her that he'd teach her how to use a phone and computer so they could stay in touch easily. Just then, little Melon, his cat, chimed in with a soft meow, clearly asking for a share of the food. Smiling, the boy scooped up his furry friend and reminded her to stick to her own cat food. Curious, the lady hesitated for a moment before meekly asking if she could share a little bit with the cat. The boy nodded, but explained that human food wasn't healthy for cats. The lady's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, her mind froze. If this food wasn't good for animals, how could it possibly be good for humans? Suddenly, her burger didn't smell as delicious anymore. A little while later, the boy showed Lady Jang how to use Discord on his phone, explaining it in the simplest way possible. He made it clear that he wouldn't be hiding inside the computer, but rather, transmission waves would carry his voice to her. Leaving his dormitory, he scratched his head, wondering if everything was going to be okay. Soon enough, he reached his destination after a short bus ride. Stepping off, he looked around and spotted his friend in the distance, waving at him. As they met face to face, they exchanged greetings, and Officer Chin poured a cold beer for him, mentioning that it was the first time he was serving him a drink. They sit down, and then our boy curiously asks how a police officer like him could drink. Chin Hao chuckles, explaining that he's off duty and dressed casually, just here as an ordinary person. With that settled, the boy places his order carefully, already thinking about the delicious items he's about to enjoy. They clink their glasses and toast each other. As they start chatting, Su Qing asks how work is going and what it's like being an outstanding officer. Chin sighs, bluntly calling it terrible. All that talk about heroes saving the day. Nonsense. Most of his days are spent handling trivial disputes between couples or settling arguments among old ladies in the neighborhood. He hardly ever gets to chase thieves or deal with serious crime. It's all just daily disputes and meaningless drama. Su Qing, always the optimist, points out the brighter side. At least people are living and working happily, and that's a good thing. Chi Hao leans back with a tired smile, admitting that he once dreamed of being a police officer when he was a kid. But back then, he faced a major setback. He stopped growing at 1.6 meters, and with the minimum height requirement being 1.7 meters, he was crushed. He cried his heart out in Su Qing's arms. Luckily, things changed when the height requirement was replaced with a high jump test. Chin Hao practiced every day and eventually achieved his dream. But now, after dealing with nothing but minor disputes, He's so exhausted that he says he'd even fight a woman with a sword just to make a big scene. Su Qing immediately shakes his head, telling him not to joke about such things. Suddenly, our boy changed the subject, casually asking what would happen if a homeless person who had lost their memory wanted to get an ID card and find work without any proof of citizenship. The officer, without hesitation, bluntly stated that getting an ID card wasn't easy. Someone fitting that description was likely a shady person, and it wouldn't be simple for them to prove their identity. With the sharpness of an officer doing his duty, he immediately asked the boy for the name and address of the person he was talking about. Caught off guard, our boy quickly spun a story about how his mother's brother had a son whose friend was in a similar situation. But before he could go any further, the officer cut him off, telling him to stop the nonsense. He reminded him that without solid proof, something like a blood test, getting an ID was out of the question. Still, the boy pressed on, asking what if the person he encountered was unidentified and strange, like a homeless guy wandering the streets. The officer, not buying it, pointed out that if someone's behavior seemed suspicious, they would have to be investigated. At that moment, our boy noticed his friend eyeing him with a suspicious gaze. Annoyed, he quickly told him to stop looking at him as if he was hiding a fugitive. He insisted that he wasn't here to figure out how to cover up someone's identity. Qin Hao chuckled and reassured him, saying he trusted him. He then suggested that if the boy was really curious, he should just ask the stranger for basic information. He also mentioned they could check the person's details through a public directory or DNA records if needed. But just as the conversation was getting interesting, Qin Hao's mood shifted. He suddenly grew irritated and told the boy to drop the topic altogether. Without waiting for a response, he downed his beer in frustration. The boy laughed it off, joking that the only reason he even brought it up was because he needed something to talk about. Otherwise, they wouldn't have met in the first place. With a playful grin, he tells his friend to forget everything and jokingly stretches out his hands, asking him to handcuff him. He's curious to experience what it's like to be interrogated and cuffed. Laughing it off, they head inside, and once they settle down, our hero brings up the topic of the ID card again. But the officer's response remains unchanged. He explains that if getting a new ID were that easy, criminals would be out stabbing people left and right, escaping with fresh identities every day. Their back and forth continues, beer after beer, until the officer eventually passes out cold. Our hero tries to shake him awake, reminding him of his duty to settle disputes between bickering old ladies. But all the officer mumbles about is wanting more beer. Seeing no other option, our hero signals the waiter not to bring any more drinks. After paying the bill, he learns there's a 50% discount if the bill reaches 100 yuan. Without missing a beat, he decides to order a ton of fish for Lady Jiang. With a fond farewell to his hiccuping friend, he grabs his takeout and heads home. Though he's a bit let down for not getting any leads, he's not too worried. There's always tomorrow. Back home, he finds the girl fast asleep. For a moment, he simply stands there, admiring her peaceful face. Something stirs inside him. His heart and mind seem to short-circuit as he struggles to understand his own feelings. Suddenly, she wakes up, slightly startled to see him. He quickly shows her the food he brought, and she softly says thanks. But that's not enough for him. Smirking, he insists she say it properly. Blushing, she looks at him and says, "Thank you, young warrior," which makes him puff up with exaggerated pride, calling it a small and easy task. As he unpacks the food, she curiously asks if he drank too much. He denies it and hands her a yogurt pack, telling her to lick it before drinking. Leading by example, he rubs his tongue against the sweet and sour yogurt, and she follows suit, surprisingly enjoying it and diving right in. He chuckles, telling her to eat up before the food gets cold, then heads to the bathroom for a bath. He can't help but smile. There's a strange comfort in coming home to someone waiting for him. Once he's back outside, the girl's eyes instantly land on him. He casually asks if she checked her clothes, which confuses her at first. Then it hits her he's talking about the bra he bought for her. Just thinking about it makes her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Apparently, trying to figure it out with YouTube tutorials didn't go as smoothly as she hoped. Later, she heads to the bathroom to change, staring nervously at the fancy dress he got her. She's used to simple, plain outfits that match her mood. Now, she wonders what kind of prickly princess she'll look like in this new one. She laid out the bra and dress on the bed, then stepped into the bathroom for a refreshing bath. Afterward, she dried her hair with a blow dryer, feeling grateful for the kind young man who had been helping her adjust to everything. However, she knew deep down that relying on him wasn't a long-term solution. With her limited knowledge, there was only so much she could do. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window as she stepped out of her room, rubbing her tired, sleep-deprived eyes. It looked like the boy had woken up early this time. Lady Jiang, still groggy, asked if he was working so early in the morning. The boy, eyes fixed on the screen, casually replied that he was just catching up on the news. A gloomy aura immediately surrounded the girl as she hesitantly asked if he was a government official. The boy chuckled, reminding her that if he were, she would have already received the ID card she wanted so badly. Switching topics, he asked if she was hungry and offered to buy breakfast, suggesting she come along. But the girl simply declines and heads to the bathroom instead. With a shrug, the boy decided to go alone, telling her she could Netflix and chill while he was gone. Humming a tune, he strolled outside, only to be stopped by the old security guard calling him over. Reluctantly, he walked toward the small group gathered near the entrance. There were 2 more people standing there, and one of the ladies wasted no time in asking if he had heard any strange noises lately. From the way she was eyeing him suspiciously, it was clear she thought he might be the source. Confused, the boy frowned and told them he hadn't heard anything unusual. He had slept soundly the entire night. He wondered aloud if there had been a theft, but the old guard shook his head with a serious expression. Instead, he suggested something far stranger. They might be haunted. Apparently, his dog had been so terrified by something the other night that it didn't even bark. Curious, the boy asked if the old guard had noticed anything else. Taking a long puff of his cigarette, the old man exhaled slowly before admitting that while he didn't see anything himself, he had caught something on the surveillance footage. With a growing sense of unease, they all gathered in the surveillance room. The old man played the footage, and as they watched, something darted across the screen, so fast that it appeared only as a blurry streak. A wave of fear washed over everyone, their faces tense with shock. But the boy felt a completely different kind of fear. Facepalming, he sighed in frustration because he was almost certain that the blurry figure was none other than Lady Jiang. Without wasting another second, he turned and hurried back to the apartment. It all made sense now. No wonder Lady Jiang had been looking so exhausted earlier. She had probably been sneaking out at night, trying to explore the world on her own, learning new things in her own way. The boy curiously asked the old guard if the same thing had happened the previous night as well. The guard shook his head, saying nothing unusual had occurred. He let out an awkward laugh and, half-jokingly, entertained the idea that maybe there was a ghost hanging around. Hearing this, the bald guy nearby and the chubby lady perked up, wondering why a ghost would be roaming around in the dead of night, especially in their place. The old man, however, decided it was best to stay alert. There might be someone lurking around, waiting for the right moment to steal something. Back home, the boy wasted no time confronting her. His voice was filled with frustration as he demanded to know why she had snuck out in the middle of the night. He stared at her, a mix of disappointment and concern in his eyes. The girl, looking guilty, meekly asked how he even knew it was her wandering outside. That only made him more frustrated. With a deep sigh, he facepalmed and reminded her about the CCTV cameras everywhere. Every move she made had been caught. The girl's face turned pale for a moment, but then she quickly explained that she had been wearing a mask. Hearing that, the boy sighed in relief. As long as she kept her face hidden, they were probably safe. Still, he made it clear if she wanted to go out again, he had to go with her. No solo trips allowed while she was staying here. He stressed how dangerous her situation was, and she couldn't just wander around like that. The girl, looking a bit timid, hesitantly asked if she had caused any trouble for him. He reassured her, saying that luckily no one recognized her. Everyone just thought there was a ghost haunting the place. She blinked in confusion, clearly having no idea what haunting even meant. Seeing her clueless expression, the boy groaned and pulled out his phone. He quickly searched for a movie about someone from ancient times ending up in the future and causing chaos with their wild behavior. In his mind, it perfectly described her. The girl, now looking guilty, promised to stop causing trouble if it was bothering him too much. The boy softened and told her to relax. To lighten the mood, he suggested ordering takeout later, asking if she wanted hamburgers, chicken rolls, or anything else. Her face lit up with a charming smile as she thanked him for ordering such healthy food. The boy smirked and teased her, saying if she wanted to eat even healthier, she could always try the cat food instead. After their playful banter, the boy got to work, grabbing the laundry and tossing the clothes into the washing machine. Noticing what he was doing, the girl curiously watched. He took the opportunity to explain how the washing machine worked. Without missing a beat, she quickly dashed to her room, grabbed her own clothes, and hurried back to add them to the machine, eager to learn. While Su Qing was sorting through the laundry, something tucked inside the girl's clothes caught his eye. Curious, he pulled it out and held it up in the air, examining it closely. The moment she saw what he was holding, her face turned red with embarrassment. Without wasting a second, she snatched the item from his hand and dashed back to her room. Su Qing stood there, puzzled. The item was a foot binding, which didn't quite add up. How was she moving around so effortlessly with her feet tightly bound like that? He thought back to when he last saw her in those shoes. Her feet had seemed perfectly fine. There was no reason for her to wrap them up with cloth. Intrigued, he decided to look it up online, hoping to find out if martial arts enthusiasts practice some kind of foot-binding technique. But judging by the confused look on his face, the search results weren't what he expected. Turning to her once again, he casually asked if he could take a look at her feet. The girl instantly pouted and shook her head, clearly uncomfortable. When he pressed for a reason, she simply ignored him, giving him the silent treatment. And that's when it finally hit him. Those bindings weren't for her feet at all. They were for her chest. Realization dawned on him like a lightning strike. No wonder she didn't bother with the undergarments he brought earlier. He had assumed they wouldn't fit her anyway. As the truth sank in, his soul nearly jumped out of his body. Before he could react, she shot him a furious glare, her sword in hand, eyes blazing with the clear threat of slicing him in half. Su Qing braced himself, expecting the worst, but after a deep breath, she managed to control her anger and turned away, leaving him frozen in terror. Desperate to lighten the mood, he tried calling out to her and started singing in his terrible voice. The lyrics were all about Lady Jiang, praising her modest stature, her natural beauty without makeup, and how stunning she was from head to toe. He even threw in a song about a man who fell in love with an ugly woman but ended up having 5 kids with her. According to him, only a true Giga Chad with a Sigma male mentality could pull off something like that, and he desperately wanted to be one of them. Despite his attempts to joke around, the only thing he earned was another round of scolding from the girl. Sighing, he decided to finally focus on the main task and told her to watch some tutorials on how to wear the undergarments properly. He promised to be back in 5 minutes, hopefully with fewer jokes this time. Exactly 5 minutes later, he returned, eager to check on her progress. To his surprise, she looked utterly spooked and with a trembling voice, asked if this was how everyone lived here. She hesitated before mentioning that while the undergarments might seem comfortable, they made her feel like a harlot. The boy chuckled and tried to reassure her, saying there was nothing wrong with feeling comfortable. But she wasn't convinced, insisting that it felt shameless. He raised an eyebrow and challenged her, asking what there was to be ashamed of. She fell silent for a moment, lost in thought. Sensing an opportunity, he launched into a humorous rant about how she was stuck in the past while modern women flaunted their assets in whatever they liked. With a playful smirk, he even added that if men could wear half underwear, then why couldn't women? But she stood her ground, firmly rejecting what she called immoral thinking. Realizing he wouldn't be able to change her mind, he decided to switch gears and calm her down. He casually mentioned that besides studying and working, computers were also great for gaming. To lighten the mood, he warned her about the toxic fan base in games like Apex Legends, but then introduced her to a much friendlier game, one that looked suspiciously similar to Super Mario. The moment she saw the cartoonish world of jumping plumbers, she was hooked. While she became engrossed in beating Nifty's speedrun record, our hero quietly slipped away, thinking it was best to keep her occupied indoors for now. Later, when he returned home, he found her still glued to the screen, struggling with the final boss. With a smile, he interrupted her game and showed her a few tricks to defeat it. After their intense gaming session, exhaustion hit him, and he decided to take a nap while she continued playing on his laptop. Lying in his room, he couldn't help but reflect on how lucky he was not to land that job on a rainy day. Because even if the interview had gone well, managing a 1,200-year-old ancient girl would have probably forced him to quit. As dusk cast its warm yellow hue across the room, he returned to find her still engrossed in the game. He suggested they eat out and told her to dress nicely this time instead of looking like a slob. He even advised her to try a different hairstyle. After some hesitation, she picked out an outfit and emerged in a new dress, blushing as she adjusted to the modern style, though it was a bit too modern for her comfort. The boy froze for a second, struck by how beautiful she looked. Flustered, he quickly urged her to change back to her original dress, worried they might draw too much attention in public. This sent her into a fit of agitation and frustration beyond measure, but eventually she complied. As they wandered outside, the old security guard at the entrance spotted them and jokingly asked if he was taking his girlfriend shopping again. The boy shook his head, clarifying that they were just friends, not dating. The old man chuckled and revealed he was holding on to a talisman to ward off ghosts, just until his mahogany arrived. The guard asked if he resembled the god from the New Year's festivities. With a thumbs up, the Su Ching assured him that he did, before hurrying off, muttering that it was getting late. Meanwhile, Lady Jiang was lost in her own thoughts, preoccupied with something on her mind. Once they were alone, she couldn't hold back her curiosity any longer and finally asked our boy what the word girlfriend meant. He casually explained that it simply referred to a female friend. But Lady Jiang wasn't satisfied. If that was the case, she wondered, why had he denied that she was his girlfriend earlier? Su Ching smiled and told her to be patient, promising he'd explain everything later. Deep down, though, he was worried. If Lady Jiang ever figured out the true meaning of girlfriend, there was a good chance she'd pack her bags and leave his place for good. If Lady Jiang Eve suggested she watch videos about her kingdom's history, thinking it might help her adjust. But Lady Jiang hesitated, admitting that revisiting her past was too painful. Everything here felt so different. The peaceful streets, free of curfews and muddy potholes, seemed almost dreamlike to her. So unlike the world she had come from. Their stroll eventually brought them to a tea stall, where Su Ching enthusiastically ordered bubble milk tea and some snacks, urging her to give it a try. Lady Jiang watched the drink curiously, but hesitated before taking a sip. Looking around, she asked if people in this world really made money doing such things, and if she could learn to do similar work. Su Ching gently explained that while she could pick up the skills, she wouldn't be able to earn money without an ID card. Hearing this, she sipped her tea with a somber expression, but Su Ching quickly reassured her, saying the ID card issue would be resolved soon and she shouldn't lose hope. When he asked if she liked the tea, Lady Jiang frowned slightly and admitted that it wasn't to her liking. The taste was odd, and the pearls were too chewy. Su Ching laughed and agreed, admitting that he didn't understand how people enjoyed drinking what he called piss-like stuff. Lady Jiang shot him a cold stare, clearly not amused at being the subject of his taste experiment. Trying to fix the situation, Su Ching quickly added that he had only ordered it because he thought girls like sweet things while his own drink is a bit sour. Our boy casually offered Lady Jiang a sip of his drink. She hesitated for a moment, but eventually took a cautious sip through the straw. The moment the delicious flavor hit her palate, her face lit up with joy. Seeing her reaction, the boy couldn't help but smile and, without hesitation, swapped his drink with her pearl tea, genuinely pleased that she enjoyed it. Despite the cheerful atmosphere, a strange feeling started creeping into Lady Jiang's heart. Something didn't feel quite right, but she chose not to dwell on it, focusing instead on sipping her drink again. After finishing their meal, the boy shamelessly let out a burp, a clear sign of his full stomach. He then suggested taking a quick tour before heading home, and soon they found themselves strolling through the vibrant city in the middle of the night. Out of the blue, the boy stopped at a nearby bus station and suggested they take a ride to somewhere special. Since it was Lady Jiang's first time on a bus, he reassured her not to panic and just follow his lead. With an easygoing smile, he dropped a coin into the fare box and stepped inside, guiding her to a window seat so she could enjoy the view. As the bus rumbled through the bustling streets, the girl gazed outside in awe. The bright lights, the lively crowds, everything seemed so new and fascinating. The boy, watching her reaction, was a bit surprised. Given that it was her first bus ride, he had expected a bigger reaction. But she simply smiled and mentioned that she had ridden horse-drawn carriages plenty of times before. Eventually, they reached the Lanjian Bridge station, where they stepped off the bus. With excitement in his voice, the boy proudly introduced her to the area, explaining that in her era, this place might have been empty and desolate, but now it was the heart of the city's nightlife. Lady Jiang looked around, taking in the dazzling sights, and couldn't help but wonder if such a transformation was even possible. The boy, sensing her amazement, encouraged her to find her own answers by studying history if she found it hard to believe. As they stood by the river, the boy took out his phone, eager to capture the moment. Lady Jiang happened to glance in his direction at just the right time, creating the perfect pose without even realizing it. And with a single click, our hero preserved that moment forever. At that moment, he promised her a trip on a plane once her identity card issue was sorted out. The idea of soaring into the sky was completely new to her, and she looked up with wide eyes, unsure. Sensing her hesitation, he reassured her with a smile, telling her that for now, she could stay in his cramped little room and take her time learning about the world. Curious like a child, she asked what came after understanding the world. He paused for a moment, thinking carefully before explaining that true freedom would follow. Freedom to know what's right and wrong for herself, to fully enjoy everything this future world had to offer. Just then, he checked his phone and announced that it was time. Right on cue, fireworks burst into the sky, painting it with vibrant colors. She watched in awe, unable to take her eyes off the dazzling display. A thought crossed her mind. Would her family be amazed by such a magnificent sight? As if reading her thoughts, he smiled and gently told her to enjoy this moment on behalf of her family too. The next day arrived, bringing with it some rather unpleasant news. Lady Jang was spotted outside, doing her ninja moves by the lightning poles. His face soured at the sight, but in a way, it was also reassuring. If she was busy playing ninja at midnight, it meant the guards were more alert now, patrolling the area more frequently. At least with her antics, there wouldn't be any real thieves around. Suddenly, Lady Jang pointed curiously at a group of people gathered outside, asking what was going on. Su Qing felt a chill down his spine when he realized they had started performing rituals to ward off ghosts in the area. But soon enough, they both went back to their meals, and she casually remarked that his lifestyle felt like being in a prison. He chuckled, reminding her of their little adventures. They had gone shopping, watched documentaries, had lunch, shed a few tears over some anime, and then enjoyed dinner. He told her that this was what having a home and living the otaku lifestyle was all about, but she still looked puzzled. Seeing her confusion, he explained that staying at home meant having the freedom to choose what to do and where to go, comparing it to an ancient landlord who spent his days lounging in his mansion with his family and a cat. After finishing her meal, Lady Jang decided to go for a little walk. Su Qing raised an eyebrow and asked if she really wanted to go out alone. She remained silent, which was all the confirmation he needed. Without missing a beat, he launched into a long tirade, listing all the dangers waiting outside and pointing out her many shortcomings. He made it clear that staying put was the best option for now. He told her bluntly that even if he gave her money to eat at restaurants, she'd still need to figure out how to earn it. Otherwise, she'd just end up spending without a second thought. He reminded her that if she wanted money, she'd have to either commit crimes for quick cash or try hunting. But since there weren't any hunting forests around, she'd likely end up digging through garbage instead. Finally, the girl fell silent and focused on her burger. Her mind clouded with the thought that without that single ID card, she couldn't even step outside for a simple walk on her own. Seeing the sadness on her face, Su Qing reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 coins, offering them to her with a gentle reminder. At least she had learned how to take the bus. Wasn't that a step forward? But the girl shook her head, refusing to take the coins, insisting that she hadn't learned anything at all. Su Qing, however, wouldn't take no for an answer. He pressed the coins into her hand, telling her to go out, experience things, and assuring her that she had actually learned a lot in just the first month of being here. Still curious, she looked outside and asked if ghosts really existed. With a slight grin, Su Qing pointed at the people outside, busy with their ghost-busting routine, and told her that once she started earning money, she could pay him back. But what if I don't earn anything? She wondered aloud. He simply shrugged and said they'd figure it out when the time came. She smiled and thanked him once again, calling him Young Warrior, a nickname she'd grown fond of using. In response, Su Qing launched a game on his computer, showing her how she could play a character, explore, and even learn to make some money in the game. He encouraged her to give it a try, see if she could get the hang of it. Curious, she asked why she couldn't just do what he did and make money online. Su Qing chuckled and explained that it wasn't that easy. It was complex, and she needed to start with the basics first. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, shattering their little moment. Su Qing's face tensed up, and without wasting a second, he told the girl to hide in her room. The knocking grew louder, and a voice from outside impatiently demanded that he open the door. Panic surged through Su Qing as he quickly guided the girl into a room and locked the door behind her. Taking a deep breath, he finally opened the door to face his father. There he was, a grumpy old man, eyes scanning the place with a stern expression. Su Qing greeted him nervously, but the old man adjusted his glasses and reminded him to address him as landlord for now. His sharp gaze swept across the room before he bluntly asked if Su Qing had found a job yet. Su Qing, still trying to keep his cool, reassured him that the rent would be paid on time. He defended himself, explaining that since he could afford his current lifestyle, he didn't see the need to find a job. But that only made the old man more agitated. Like any typical father, he launched into a lecture, berating Su Qing for being a failure. Before things could escalate, Su Qing quickly cut him off, reminding him that if he was here for rent, he'd gladly pay up. But then, the old man's eyes landed on the RPG game running on the computer, and his irritation deepened. He made it crystal clear. If Su Qing didn't get a job by next month, the rent was going up, no questions asked. Suddenly, his father's face changed dramatically as his gaze fell on the women's clothes hanging outside. With a sharp tone, he called Su Qing's name. Realizing the misunderstanding, Su Qing hurriedly tried to explain, but before he could, his father questioned if he had started wearing such clothes himself. The room grew tense. Weighing his options, Su Qing decided it was better for his father to know a girl was staying over rather than letting this assumption continue. Forcing a casual tone, he said the clothes belonged to a friend's sister who was staying for a few days. Just then, he knocked Lady Zhang's door and told her to open it, and as she stepped out timidly, he quickly introduced her to his father, hoping she wouldn't do anything suspicious. Lady Zhang hesitated, unsure of how to address him, and quietly asked Su Qing. He told her to call him uncle, but his father's sharp intuition caught her hesitation. His expression darkened, suspecting she had almost called him dad. Still wary, his father suddenly took Su Qing's hand, making both of them tense up. Seeing her unease, he reassured her that everything was fine before turning back to Su Qing, demanding the real story. Su Qing insisted nothing was unusual and warned his father not to snoop around. Instead, he told his father to give Jiang the spare key for now. Hesitating, Su Qing took it but made a mental note to get it back later. He couldn't risk his parents finding her home alone one day. His father remained unconvinced and bluntly asked if she was his girlfriend. Su Qing denied it immediately, but his father wasn't fooled, pointing out how she had almost called him dad. Caught off guard, Su Qing dismissed it, saying he must have misheard. But then his father asked how old she was. Flustered, Su Qing nearly fumbled, starting to say 1, 2 before quickly correcting himself. She was 18. The room fell into silence once again, the tension heavier than before. His father finally sighed in frustration, telling Su Qing that he was creating bad karma. Su Qing, unfazed, questioned what kind of bad karma he was referring to. He argued that the girl was only staying temporarily, and that even if they were dating, it would still be normal and reasonable, hardly something that could be called bad karma. Hearing this, his father fell silent, deep in thought. He had originally come to remind his son to pay rent and find a job, but instead he found himself dealing with a girl who had nearly called him dad. His tone shifted as he resumed lecturing, pointing out that Su Qing didn't even have a proper job. Su Qing, growing irritated, snapped back that as long as he could make money, having a traditional job wasn't necessary. He reminded his father that they were living in the age of technology and that he had explained this many times before, yet his father still insisted there were no guarantees. Deciding to put an end to the argument, Su Qing to transfer the rent money and told his father to leave the key once he received it. He then asked about the utilities bill for this month. His father replied that it was 238 yuan. Checking his account, Su Qing realized he had exactly 238 yuan left. If he transferred everything, he would have nothing left for food. But to avoid further nagging, he sent the full amount anyway and held out his hand for the key. He then pointed out that he had never heard of a landlord keeping a key to freely enter a rented house. His father, unfazed, simply reminded him that it was his house. Su Qing, frustrated, retorted that he was paying rent and should be treated like a tenant. His father warned him to make payments on time, saying he didn't want to come collecting every month. He also added that if Su Qing failed to find a job, he would have to keep paying rent, and not just any rent. It would be more expensive than other places. Handing over the key, his father added that if he was dissatisfied, he could go rent somewhere else. Su Qing silently acknowledged his father's cleverness. Renting from him was expensive, but at least the money stayed in the family. If he rented from someone else, that money would be gone for good. Just then, his father mentioned that his mother was calling them back for dinner. He then subtly gestured toward the door, implying something unspoken. But before he could say it, Su Qing quickly cut him off, emphasizing once again that she was just a friend, not a girlfriend. His father scoffed, asking if he really thought he looked like an idiot. Su Qing sighed and relented, saying he still had things to do and would come home when he was free. His father reminded him that he had always warned against young people dating too early, saying it would only cause trouble. He also pointed out that this situation was still better than the last time. Hearing that, Su Qing immediately interrupted, pleading for him to stop bringing up the past. His father simply told him to find a job quickly, saying they could talk again after that. At the door, his father suddenly paused, then turned back with a final piece of advice, telling him to be safe. Su Qing felt helpless, unsure of how to make him believe that she really was just a friend. Then a thought struck him. Calling out to his father, he bent down and pointed at the straw shoes on the ground. His father, puzzled, asked why he was showing them. Su Qing explained that they were antiques from the Tang dynasty and asked how much they might be worth. Given his father's background as an archaeologist, he was the perfect person to ask. But his father, narrowing his eyes, asked for clarification. Exactly which era of Tang dynasty was he talking about? Su Qing casually replied that it was probably from Li Longji's era. Su Qing excitedly pointed at the shoes, asking if they were valuable. His father's expression turned grim. He admitted he had no idea about their worth, but suggested that Su Qing should visit Nanshan Hospital for a mental checkup. As he walked away, he silently wondered if it was too late to have another child. Seeing his father leave so abruptly, Su Qing was confused. His father, on the other hand, was deep in thought. His son was holding a pair of shoes with a Jack logo, and he was being told they were Tang Dynasty antiques. He scoffed internally. Why not claim they were personally sewn by Liu Bei while he was at it? Out loud, he muttered that playing too many computer games made people stupid and advised Su Qing to go out for walks instead. Su Qing sighed, realizing his hopes of striking it rich had completely crumbled. To be fair, these straw shoes could be called pre-Qing artifacts, maybe even from the Khan era, and it wouldn't be wrong. After all, history seemed to be separated from the present by just a thin membrane. Poke through it, and someone might just fall out. Still unwilling to give up, he tried again, urging his father to take a closer look and see if they could pass as antiques. His father's eyes lit up briefly before realization struck. He angrily lectured Su Qing, demanding that he focus on proper work instead of indulging in nonsense. He reminded him of how old Tam constantly bragged about his son being a police officer, while he himself had nothing to say when asked about Su Qing's career. Scratching his head, Su Qing awkwardly defended himself, calling it freelance work. Meanwhile, he discreetly hid the shoes behind his back, afraid Lady Jiang might see them and mistake him for someone with a strange straw shoe obsession. His father, still mumbling about freedom, suddenly turned around and snapped, cursing the very idea. His voice rose as he scolded Su Qing for trying to pass off tattered shoes as antiques. If he weren't already grown, his father would have given him a good beating. Mid-sentence, he reached for the sword lying on the table, sending a wave of panic through Su Qing. Su Qing knew that if his father took the sword, Lady Jiang would be furious. She carried it with her even while eating. Without thinking, Su Qing lunged forward, trying to grab it first, laughing nervously as he insisted it was just a toy. But his father didn't believe him and tightened his grip, warning him to let go. Refusing to back down, Su Qing held on with both hands, desperately trying to convince his father. However, the old man remained silent, his grip firm, making the situation even more tense. Su Qing finally reached a compromise and agreed to take a look. As his father slowly drew the blade from its sheath, its bright silver gleam caught the light. With each centimeter revealed, Su Qing's heart pounded, watching his father's expression grow increasingly grim. Anxiously, he asked for his opinion. Without warning, his father shouted angrily and threw the sword back at him, demanding that he return it. Stunned, Su Qing could only watch as his father irritably walked away, muttering to himself about almost believing this abnormal kid. Before stepping out, he gave one last instruction. If Su Qing wasn't going to find a proper job, he should at least take the civil service exam and serve the people. The conversation ended with the sound of the door slamming shut. Left alone, Su Qing examined the sword curiously. No wonder there were no signs of oxidation. It looked like a flawless replica of a centuries-old weapon. Under the light, its polished surface gleamed without a single scratch. Calling it an antique was almost laughable. No one would believe it. Noticing Lady Jiang peeking from the side, he spoke up, warning her not to sneak glances and to be careful with the sword. He told her not to take it out carelessly. Then, remembering her hesitation earlier, he asked what she had been about to call his father. She admitted she hadn't known how to address him. Su Qing explained that dad and father meant the same thing, and she could just call him uncle. As for his mother, she could refer to her as auntie. After a brief moment of thought, Lady Jiang nodded, saying she understood. Changing the subject, she asked if he still wanted to learn martial arts. The mention of training brought back a memory of someone named Su struggling to hold a horse stance for even 5 minutes. Without hesitation, Su Qing asked if there was a way to quickly become a master or learn a powerful technique? Her answer was simple. There were no shortcuts in martial arts training. Hearing this, Su Qing laughed and rubbed his temples. In a peaceful society, martial arts held little value compared to the outside world. There were no benefits, and any fight would only lead to legal trouble and compensation payments. Enduring hardship now, for an uncertain future, seemed pointless. It felt like an illness. Suddenly, he sat up straight, shifting the conversation to something he excelled at. Enthusiastically, he suggested playing games instead, pushing training aside for later. Learning to survive was a process, just like how children started with simple games, building blocks, puzzles, or video games. There was no difference. Lady Zhang sat properly in front of the computer screen, while Su Qing stood beside her, guiding her step by step. He instructed her where to click and reassured her when she hesitated. After some time, she started to grasp the basics and realized what she was playing. Curious, she asked how people made money through gaming. Su Qing explained that once she mastered it, she could farm for others. Confused, she asked who she would be farming for and why. He paused, considering the best way to explain it. If she didn't understand, she might lose motivation or even suspect he was tricking her. He explained that this was just a form of entertainment, something to pass the time when you're full and have nothing else to do, kind of like playing a game. With so many people playing, tens or even hundreds of thousands, there would always be some who didn't have the time to play themselves. Not everyone was as free as they were, and for those who couldn't play, they'd pay others to farm for them. Lady Zhang was stunned, unable to believe it. People were paying others to play games for them? Su Qing confirmed, saying that after spending money to buy the game, they wanted someone else to spend the time playing it for them. It was like helping landlords raise crickets. They'd raise them until they were big enough to play. He compared it to a girl addicted to games, which was far better than pretending to be a ghost to scare people at night. As for the future, Boy said the first step was to learn how to survive, and only after that could one think about the future. Meanwhile, the fat cat Melon, completely the opposite of its owner, had no such worries. It stretched lazily and settled in for a nap. The scene shifted to a warm family of three, where the cat waddled over to rub against Su Qing's legs. He gently pushed it away, telling it to go play elsewhere. Rejected, the cat turned toward Lady Zhang, who was focused on the game. It swayed its body before jumping onto the table, then nestled comfortably in her lap. Seeing this, Lady Zhang smiled slightly, remarking on how strange the cat was. As night fell, the police station was still busy. Officers worked diligently at their desks when one spoke up, asking if anyone was hungry and suggesting they order food together. Most agreed, but one young officer turned down the offer. He said he wasn't hungry. As the others made their food plans, Qin Hao, who was observing outside, thought to himself that the day had been unusually idle. At this, the officers suddenly turned to look at him. He noticed their attention and asked, confused, why they were staring. One officer replied, warning him not to speak like that saying things like, today is really idle, was a bad omen. Qin Hao scratched his head, not understanding what had just happened, while the others sighed, shaking their heads in resignation. They quickly stopped ordering food and returned to their desks, realizing they'd have to work overtime. Two officers walked out of the building, and the older one advised Qin Hao never to say things like that in the future. Hao, still confused, asked why. The older officer explained that this was mysticism. It couldn't be explained clearly, but if someone said it, the day would definitely turn busy and chaotic. Qin Hao wondered to himself if this was the flag planting Qing Zi had mentioned. When they arrived at their destination, the young officer looked up at the building in front of them. It was an apartment complex on the 6th floor. As they approached, they noticed a drunk man slumped by the wall, clutching a bottle tightly in his hand, though he had already passed out. The police officer called out, questioning why someone was lying there. Qin Hao observed the scene, instantly recognizing it as a big case. The man, awakened by the flashlight, stumbled up like an owl and complained about the officer's late arrival, demanding that the woman inside open the door. As soon as he spoke, Qin Hao had to cover his nose. The overpowering smell of alcohol hit him instantly. Remaining calm, the police officer knocked on the door, informing the occupants that they had received a report of someone causing trouble. A woman poked her head out, denying that she had made the report, suggesting it must have been the neighbors since the noise had been loud. The drunk man, seeing the door open, immediately erupted into insults, yelling that he was the one who called the police. He berated the woman for locking him out and demanded an explanation. The officer asked if he was her husband, to which she sighed and confirmed, apologizing. She explained that she had refused to let him in because he had been drinking too much, despite having warned him before. She promised to discipline him right away. The man, unfazed, jabbed a finger at her and scoffed, mocking the idea that she could discipline him. He ranted about how having a few drinks wasn't a crime and threatened to teach her a lesson instead. Seeing his aggressive stance, the police officer calmly took out his handcuffs, warning that if he didn't cooperate, they could take him to the station to sober up. The sight of the cuffs made the man tremble instantly. Panicking, he assured them there was no need, repeatedly insisting that he was already sober. Chin Hao, standing behind, smirked slightly, another case solved. But before he could feel too accomplished, the officer's walkie-talkie crackled with an urgent alarm about a situation in area. Turning to Chin Hao, the old officer gave him a look that silently blamed him for jinxing the peace. Meanwhile, Su Qing was fast asleep when a series of strange noises woke him up. Groggy, he scratched his head in confusion and wondered what was going on. As he opened his door to check, he noticed a dark figure moving in the living room. His first thought was that the female warrior was playing ghost tricks again in the middle of the night. Pushing the door open, he called out, asking if she was heading out again. But as the lights flicked on, his expression froze. The figure wasn't Lady Jiang, but an unfamiliar intruder sneaking around. Shock hit him instantly. He blurted out, demanding to know who the thief was. The sudden commotion woke Lady Jiang as well. As she stepped out, her eyes widened, instantly grasping the situation. Realizing he had been caught, the thief panicked and bolted toward the exit. Su Qing instinctively yelled for him to stop, but before he could react, a blur shot past him like the wind. Lady Jiang had already sprung into action. With just one hand, she caught up and grabbed the thief's head, effortlessly subduing him. Her sharp eyes burned with fury, and her grip tightened, revealing lean, sinewy muscles beneath her delicate frame. The thief trembled violently, unable to move under her strength. Su Qing, seeing the man on the verge of collapse, hurriedly called out for her to stop before she accidentally killed him. At last, she let go, and as the thief's mask slipped off, he immediately fell to his knees, no longer daring to even think about running. Lady Jiang remained vigilant, standing ready to strike at any moment. Observing the tense situation, Su Qing could only sigh helplessly, wondering what was happening. His eyes flickered with curiosity and doubt. After all, in just a blink, she had grabbed a grown man by the neck and thrown him to the ground, nearly choking him unconscious. Even more shocking were the clear handprints left on the man's arm. Her strength was truly terrifying. Trying to regain control of the situation, Su Qing firmly told the man to stay put while he called a police officer friend to handle things. The orange-haired boy, still lying face down, pleaded desperately, calling him Big Brother and begging to be let go. However, upon seeing Lady Jiang's stern expression, he became even more frightened, coughing weakly as he promised he had only acted foolishly for a moment and wouldn't dare to repeat it. Su Qing, unimpressed, tiredly questioned why the man didn't just earn money with his own hands and feet instead of resorting to such behavior. He pointed out that money wasn't something that simply fell from the sky and skeptically asked if this was truly his first time. The man nodded frantically, swearing it was, and desperately pleaded not to be reported to the police. Su Qing could only sigh again. If this guy ever tried something like this again, he'd better have the skills to back it up. What bad luck. He had heard this place was haunted, so he came to check it out, only to almost be strangled by someone with terrifying strength. Was this girl secretly a martial arts champion? Lost in thought, Su Qing watched as the young man continued to bow his head and apologize, though his words felt completely insincere. Deciding to push further, Su Qing announced that he would call the police to check if this counted as self-defense. If needed, they could take the man to the hospital as well. At this, the orange-haired guy panicked further, weakly grabbing Su Qing's pant leg and insisting he was fine. He swore that his injuries were from accidentally falling and had nothing to do with either Su Qing or Lady Jiang. Curious, Su Qing probed again, asking if this was really his first time dealing with the police. The man immediately assured him it was, swearing it was truer than pearls. Without another word, Su Qing turned and pointed toward the window, telling him to leave the same way he came in. They would pretend nothing had happened. Realizing he was being given a way out, the orange-haired boy wasted no time. He quickly leaped out the window, shouting his thanks and wishing them both peace. Su Qing could only scratch his head at the guy's carefree attitude. In the middle of the night, yelling like that, he'd better be careful, or someone would report him for disturbing public order. Lady Jiang curiously peeked out and questioned if they were really letting the thief go just like that. As Su Qing struggled to close the window, He explained that reporting to the police wasn't an option. There was no guarantee she wouldn't be held responsible for hitting him, and her identity could also become an issue. If they followed proper procedures with interrogations and investigations, he wouldn't be able to help her. Scaring the thief a little and pretending nothing happened was the safest choice. Still unconvinced, Lady Jiang raised her voice, frustrated that a thief could still hold her accountable. Su Qing patiently broke it down. Stealing was one thing, but injuring someone was another. The consequences depended on the severity of the injury. Before he could continue, he suddenly noticed she was still fully dressed and immediately asked if she was planning to sneak out again. Lady Jiang casually responded that she was used to sleeping in that outfit. She had only gotten up because she heard noises outside and wanted to check. Su Qing signaled his understanding, teasing that not everyone was like her, wandering around at night like an owl. He reassured her not to overthink and go back to sleep, adding that he'd call someone to fix the broken window in the morning. Before leaving, he turned off the lights and wished her good night. Lady Jiang firmly responded, her voice clear in the darkness.